welcome and good afternoon. My name is Amy and I use she, her, and I'm happy to have you join us today for a great session on advanced care planning. Before we dive into the content itself, I want to acknowledge that while we are joining virtually from various places, where I am joining you from is the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, the Haudenosaunee, and most recently, the Mississauga of the Credit River. And that this land is covered by Treaty 13 and that we are all shared members of this land. And so I'm quite happy to be welcoming both Megan and Nancy to speak with us today. Megan Rochford is has an MSW and RSW and is a registered social worker, those acronyms, who has worked in the community of social work in the Simcoe County for almost 20 years and has been with Matthew House Hospice for 3.5 years as a client care coordinator. Megan has taken extra training with the Hospice, Palliative Care Ontario, to be a regional champion for advanced care planning and healthcare consent. She has implemented a training program for MHH volunteers so they can learn to facilitate community education on advanced care planning. When Megan is not at work, she loves to curl up with a good book or walk in the forest with her family, which sounds fantastic, especially in the summertime.
Thanks.
We're also really lucky to have Nancy. Nancy is a retired elementary school principal. She also taught a course at Lakehead University and the Faculty of Education and supervised teacher candidates for 3 years after her retirement. Doesn't sound much like a retirement, but I think that shows what kind of person Nancy is. Nancy is also currently a volunteer at Matthew House Hospice, helping out at the courtesy desk and in the residential wing. She helps to facilitate the HUG program, which, as adorable as it sounds, is actually an 8-week session supporting children who have experienced death of a loved one. She's also a volunteer at the COVID vaccination clinic. Thank you. And Nancy has 2 adult children and 2 grandchildren, with a 3rd on the way. Her current hobbies are motorcycling and snowmobiling, and Nancy lives on a horse farm in Simcoe County, where her and her husband have a boarding facility. And she has recently done the advanced care planning training and is keen to share the valuable information that she has learned. And so we appreciate both of them being here, especially because we can bring them in from different spaces.
Here we go. So today we're going to be talking about healthcare consent and advanced care planning, and it's all about the conversations. So again, my name is Megan. I'm a registered social worker here at Matthews House Hospice, and we're in South Simcoe. So coming to you from a little of a distance, but we're very happy to share this information. As Amy said, I did this, I've been talking about advanced care planning and healthcare consent for many years, and then did some extra training over the last few years with HPCO, Hospice Palliative Care Ontario, and in particular did their lead training last year, and then did some training with some of our volunteers. So I'm so happy to have Nancy joining us here as one of our volunteers who will share part of the presentation. I'm going to do the first half. We'll then switch over and Nancy's going to do the second half. Okay, so hold on, my screen is not switching. Okay, all right, so the objectives. So today we're going to be talking about understanding what advanced care planning is in Ontario, how to confirm your substitute decision maker, SDM, and how to develop some ideas on how to begin having advanced care planning conversations with your substitute decision maker and others. So just to kind of let us all know that when we're talking about advanced care planning, we're talking about living. We're talking about what's truly important to you. So this is just to lighten the mood a little bit. It's a cartoon, as you can see. And Charlie Brown says, someday we will all die, Snoopy. And Snoopy responds, true, but all the other days we will not. And what this means is we're focusing on living. What's truly important to you in your life? What do you value? And how do you wish to live your life? So while we're going through this presentation, I want you to think about these thoughts because life is unpredictable. Advanced care planning is for everyone because we don't know what will happen when we walk out the door. And if someone ever had to make decisions for us, we would want them to know how we want to live. So imagine you're at the hospital, too ill or hurt to speak for yourself. Do you know who would make your decisions for you? Or conversely, your partner or your parent or sibling has had a stroke and is unable to communicate with the doctors. Would you know what's important to them to make healthcare decisions on their behalf? And that's really important because we want to know what are our loved ones' wishes, their values, and your beliefs, and be able to communicate what our wishes, values, and beliefs are so that decisions can be made that would be what we want. So the first thing is to talk about what terminology we use here in Ontario, because there's lots of different terminology, and the words we use are very important to create shared meaning and understanding. And so you hear a lot of these other words that are not aligned with Ontario law, like advanced care plan, which is different from advanced care planning. You hear about advanced directives, personal directives, living wills. Those are very commonly heard words, but they're not aligned with Ontario law. In Ontario, we talk about advanced care planning, which is having a plan in place, which is what we're going to talk about today, two parts: who is our substitute decision maker, and also what our wishes, values, and beliefs are, having those conversations. In Ontario, healthcare consent is very important, as well as power of attorney and goals of care. So we can, we want to make sure we're using the correct language in Ontario to make sure we're keeping things straight. So those three of those key terms, advanced care planning, goals of care discussions, and consent, are really important. And so this slide and the next one are two ways to look at that information and those words and understand what they mean. So advanced care planning, that's the conversations we want to have, which confirm our substitute decision maker and prepare that person for the future decision making. It is where we focus on what's important to me. It's also important to know that advanced care planning is not consent for future care, which is that third square at the bottom. Goals of care discussions are more specific. So it's not wishes and values and hopes. It's usually in the context of a current illness about a person's values and goals leading up to treatment options or care decisions. And the goal of goals of care discussions are to make sure that the treatment options and decisions align with a person's wishes, values, and beliefs or their goals. Once those conversations have had, the healthcare provider has to have a conversation to ensure that the client or the person who is capable, or their substitute decision maker if they're not capable, is able to have a conversation and understand and appreciate and give consent for an action that's going to happen. So this is one way to look at it. And this is another way. So HBC, Hospice Palliative Care Ontario, has made both of these diagrams in hopes that it resonates. One of these resonates. So in this one, the blue arrow at the top, it's kind of overarching. Our values, beliefs, our wishes, our goals for care are the overarching values. And so advanced care planning is the first step. We're going to talk about what our wishes and values are, and we're going to decide who our substitute decision maker is going to be. In the future, should something happen and there is a specific illness or treatment decisions that go along with an illness that have to be discussed, then that's where goals of care discussion come in. And though the discussions you've had in the past or current discussions inform your goals of care, and then the decision making and consent. So healthcare consent is very important, and it's important that prior to any healthcare decisions, your healthcare provider obtains informed consent from a mentally capable person. And so it either comes from the patient or the substitute decision maker if the person's is incapable. Consent is always needed, from little things like changing Advil to Tylenol to big things like open heart surgery or other big things like that. The only exception is when, in case of emergency, the healthcare practitioner does not need to require consent in case of emergency, but once a person is stabilized, then they have to get consent either from the person if they're capable or from their substitute decision maker if they're not. And again, if you have any questions as we go through this, please feel free to jump in. So healthcare consent, the healthcare provider needs to provide certain things in order to be able to get the healthcare consent. They have to talk about your condition and the recommended treatments, as well as alternatives to the proposed treatment, and what are the likely outcomes of accepting or refusing treatment. On our part, in order to be able to give informed consent, we have to be mentally capable. And that means we have the ability to understand and appreciate the consequences of an action or lack of an action or of a treatment decision. You have to understand the information that's relevant to making the decisions, and you can understand the likely results of making or refusing a certain condition, a certain decision, sorry. I hope that, I'm wondering if that feels familiar to anyone, or if you in your own head, you can think of some examples where that has been your experience. So there's two important parts to advanced care planning in Ontario. The first part is confirming your substitute decision maker. And we're going to get more into detail of that in a minute. And as I said, the second part is having the conversations. So the second part is what Nancy's going to focus on, and I'm going to focus on this first part about confirming our substitute decision makers. And we always want to make sure we have these conversations long before there's a crisis. So we are always encouraging people, no matter your age or stage in life, we want to be having conversations about advanced care planning so that should something happen, there is someone you know and love and trust to make your decisions, and they know what your wishes, values, and beliefs are, so that they could make decisions that they know you would make if you could make them yourself. So, not sure if anyone has thought about this, just wondering if anyone has a substitute decision maker. Next. There we go. So this is the substitute decision maker hierarchy. So every single person on here would be considered a substitute decision maker. And we're going to go through this, this chart and spend a bit of time here. So feel free to ask any questions if you want, because most of us don't realize that according to Ontario law, we all have a substitute decision maker. And this is the chart that is outlined in the Ontario Healthcare Consent Act that allows another person to make decisions for us if we cannot. And I'm going to talk about power of attorney for finances just a little bit in a moment, but I will say this does not apply to finances. This is only for healthcare decisions for personal care. So your substitute decision maker would be the highest ranked person who is mentally capable. And there's a few other criteria which we'll get into. So to focus on this chart first, the first three in yellow are your legally appointed substitute decision makers. You're going to know if you've done this, and hopefully you would know if someone had named you attorney for personal care. The court-appointed guardian and the representative appointed by the Consent Capacity Board, those are legal. Those happen through a legal court system. So if you had a court-appointed guardian or there was a representative appointed by the Consent Capacity Board, you would know that process because it's long and involved. Power of attorney for personal care is the most common and the most usual legally appointed power of attorney. And that you could name whoever you'd like in there. If someone did not have a power of attorney for personal care, and again, I'll talk a little bit more about that one specifically in a few minutes, it goes down to the green 5 in green, the automatic family members. First being spouse or partner. And what I want to comment on spouse or partner is spouse is considered your legally married spouse. Partner could be someone you're common law married to, but it can also be a person who you live with, who you have a relationship of primary importance, even if it's a non-sexual relationship. So if you and your best friend live together and consider that relationship of primary importance, that person could be considered your partner and could make decisions for you according to this hierarchy. So that's a really important thing to know. The other thing to know is that if you're legally separated from someone, they are not considered your spouse or partner. So that we can talk a bit more about that one in a minute. If you don't have a spouse or partner, it falls to parents or children. And I really want to highlight that on this line and the fourth one, siblings, it's any living parents, children on that line. So if you have a parent who's living obviously over 18, mentally capable, over 16, mentally capable, and is not barred from being your substitute decision maker, and you have 3 children over the age of 16, then all 4 of those people would be your substitute decision maker. The person proposing the treatment, who we just talked about, your healthcare practitioner, who's making a decision about whether you're capable and understanding and appreciating information, if they decide that you can't make that decision and they turn to your substitute decision maker and they get on this hierarchy and they're down to parents and children, if they cannot choose which person they talk to and which person gets to make the decision. The parents and children, anyone who's on that line, makes the decision together, or they nominate the spokesperson for it. If there isn't agreement, the doctor can't choose, I like this a child, or I like that parent making the decision, I'm going to go with their decision. They have to turn it over to the public guardian and trustee. So very important to know that if there's conflict within the family and there is more than one person on the same level of automatic family members, then they have to make decisions together. Parent with right of access, I'm not really going to go into too much because that's really regarding children or people who have Children's Aid Society involved. But siblings is the same thing. If you didn't have spouse or partner, parents or children, and you came down to siblings, let's say you have 4 siblings or 3 siblings who are all living over the age of 16, mentally capable, the doctor or nurse or whoever's proposing the treatment cannot say, I'm going to listen to this brother or this sister. All siblings have to make decisions together unless they nominate one person as their spokesperson. And if not, then again, it goes back down to the public guardian and trustee to make a decision. After siblings or any other relatives. So this is any relative by blood, marriage, or adoption. So really, when we get to this list at the bottom, we're looking for anyone related, blood, marriage, or adoption, who will make decisions for you, because the person of last resort is the public guardian and trustee, which is a branch of the government, and they do not want to make decisions for anyone because they don't know the person. They don't know what their wishes are, their hopes, or their values. They'll only make decisions they believe would be in the person's best interest, right? So the public guardian trustee does not want to make decisions. What you'll notice is your best friend, your neighbor is not on this list. So if your best friend or your neighbor is the person that you know would make the decisions you want to make, then you need to be completing a power of attorney for personal care to raise them up on this hierarchy so that they're above the automatic family members. Just going to pause there for a second, see if there's any questions about this hierarchy.
Hi, Megan. It's Cindy.
Yep. Yes, thank you, Cindy. Yeah.
I'm one of the palliative care navigators here at SCHC.
Okay.
And I have done some education on this in the past. I just want to confirm with you that if someone expects that their substitute decision maker would be their spouse and they don't want it to be anyone different, there's no need to formalize with the power of attorney, correct?
There is not for personal care. So if their spouse or partner is going to be, they want them to be their substitute decision maker, they're the highest on the list after the legal one. If they haven't done a power of attorney, that's perfectly fine. Spouse or partner, as long as that they're at the top of the list, that's fine. They don't need to do it. It is free. You can do it with, again, we'll get into this. There's free booklets through the Ministry of Attorney General that people can do it on. It's good to have it in writing, but it's not necessary. The other thing to know is that banks want to see something in writing. So if they aren't going to formalize it for healthcare, that's fine, but they would need to formalize it for finances.
Even if it's the spouse?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
See, I knew I'd learned something.
So I do have, I put together a slide, you'll see it in a few more, about power of attorney for property, and I'll mention it there, but this hierarchy has no sway for continuing power of attorney for property. So if for example, they had joint bank accounts, they're both on the mortgage, the spouse can do whatever they want on things that they're joint on, but they don't have any legal right to act on any individual accounts or do any CRA taxes or anything that is just specifically in the person's name, even as a spouse. Yeah, anyway, we'll get to that one a bit more, but this is for power of attorney for healthcare.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask one more question about competency.
Yeah.
And can you maybe talk a little bit more about like fluctuating competency? Like there are times where people can be quite lucid and able to respond for themselves. And if there's a period of time where they're not able to speak for themselves and we defer to a power of attorney or a substitute decision maker, that's not a permanent thing and that it can go back and forth.
That's right. So a person's competency can fluctuate, as you mentioned, and it is our responsibility as a healthcare provider to learn if there is a time of day or a specific setting that helps a person be more capable. And then that's when we're assessing whether they understand and appreciate the risks and benefits of an action or not following through on a treatment plan. Everyone is allowed to make their own decisions, even if we disagree with them, provided they're capable. Okay, so power of attorney for personal care. If you don't want to rely on your automatic substitute decision maker and you'd rather choose someone else for you, as we've just said, you're going to complete a power of attorney for personal care. So this slide just talks a little bit about who you'd want, what you want for a substitute decision maker. As I said, a power of attorney for personal care is different than a power of attorney for property. A power of attorney for personal care cannot make decisions for you for finances and vice versa unless they're named in the specific document, and there's 2 of them. So it's likely you'd want someone who's close to you, who you trust, who you know well. It's good to talk to that person ahead of time so they know that they're being named as your substitute decision maker or power of attorney, and that they're willing to act on your behalf if it ever became necessary. So to be valid, a person has to be mentally, to complete a power of attorney. You have to be mentally capable. You have to sign the document voluntarily, and it also has to be in front of 2 witnesses. So all 3 of you have to be together at the same time. So traits of a good substitute decision maker. We've kind of talked about this before. They honor your wishes and instructions. Most importantly, even if they differ from your own, they can be a strong advocate. They're guided by your most recently expressed wishes and values and beliefs. And I just want to highlight that because a lot of times people can write something in a document and it's good information for someone to have, but if they wrote something and then next week they say, forget that, this is what I want, we have to go by the most recently expressed wishes, values, and beliefs. And also very important is calm in a crisis and able to handle conflict. If someone has to be a substitute decision maker, it often means that their loved one is not in a good place right now. There's a struggle of some sort, there's a change in their health. And so it's emotional for the loved one to be able to make decisions. So we want to be able to have these conversations in advance so that they can be prepared to make decisions and they're calm in a crisis. It's important to have. So here is the slide that I put together about the continuing power of attorney for property. I just want to highlight a couple of the differences. It's a separate document from the power of attorney for personal care. A person has to be at least 18 years old to be named as a power of attorney for property, which is unlike the power of attorney for personal care, which is 16. I feel like I skipped a slide here with, I'm having trouble with moving things forward. I feel like I slipped a slide, so I want to make sure I did say that earlier. There's usually an effective date signed for the continuing power of attorney for property, which is, again, unlike the power of attorney for personal care. The reason the word continuing is in this one, the one for property, is because it's effective the date it's signed and ongoing. The power of attorney for personal care is only effective if the person is not able to make their own decisions. So every time a healthcare practitioner is proposing a treatment, they are assessing whether a person is capable and able to understand, appreciate, and make a decision. on that specific treatment that they're talking about. As I mentioned before, there's no legal hierarchy established for the automatic substitute decision maker. Again, unlike the power of attorney for personal care, that Healthcare Consent Act of 1996 does not hold sway when we're talking about property. Therefore, if it's not completed prior to a person's incapacity, someone would have to apply to be a person's guardian. So again, as I said, if the two people, spouses in particular, have things joined, spouses can act on each other's behalf. But if they're have separate financial dealings going on, someone would have to apply to the courts to be a guardian in order to be able to legally act on their behalf regarding their individual assets. A power of attorney for property can be paid for service. Again, not like the power of attorney for personal care. There is in law set out amounts, a percentage of money coming in, a percentage of money going out to reduce the risk of financial abuse, to minimize it. Can't 100% alleviate that risk, but it reduces it. And you'd want similar good traits in your power of attorney for property, someone who's calm and able to handle a crisis, who will honor your wishes and your values, even if they differ from your own, and obviously mentally. There we go. I think we skipped this slide when I was trying to go through it. So requirements to act as a substitute decision maker. I'm sorry, I'm going backwards. For power of attorney for personal care, mentally capable, able to understand and appreciate the risks and benefits of a treatment or deciding against a treatment, at least 16 years old. There's no court order separating or separation agreement prohibiting the access to the incapable person. They have to be available and willing to assume responsibility. So in my mind, I always have the words willing, able, and available in my mind. That covers 3 of them. And then at 16, and there's no court order. So they're not separated or have any other kind of legal agreement that they cannot access each other. So willing, able, and available are the key 3 things that I like to keep in my mind when we're talking about who can be your substitute decision maker. And then that quick note, it can't be someone you pay to give you healthcare or residential or social support. So we talked about the power of attorney for property. So the summary here of this part of the presentation, and then we're going to move on to Nancy talking about how to have the conversations. It's really important to remember that advanced care planning conversations are not consent for treatment. So advanced care planning conversations are the wishes, the values, and the beliefs, and confirming who our substitute decision maker is, either by that hierarchy set out in law or by completing a power of attorney for personal care. Wishes do not have to be in writing. They can be verbal, and the most recent wishes prevail. We've talked about point number 3, and point number 4 is you can prepare a power of attorney for personal care if you have someone specific in mind. And as I mentioned before, there is, you can do it with a lawyer, or you can do it with the Ministry of Attorney General's kit. And then I have a second website that's also really helpful in walking us through that, Steps to Justice. And again, that'll be a website that I forward on to you through Amy. So advanced care planning is all about living well, getting our things, our legal documents in order, so that we can live well as best as we can for as long as we can. Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Nancy.
Thank you.
And I'll kind of follow along and move things forward as I see, or let me know.
Perfect. Okay. Well, Megan has given us a ton of information to think about, and I'm sure your head is spinning a little bit. And now we're going to switch. I love this slide. Got a severe case of ostrich syndrome. So although 93% of survey respondents think it's important to have these advanced care plan conversations, only 36% say they have actually done that. So we are hoping that after today's presentation, we will increase that 36%. So instead of avoiding the conversations, let's talk about living well. You can see a lot of how they started off. It's difficult to get those conversations going. And you actually might be fairly comfortable getting the conversation going, but the people that you're talking with aren't comfortable. I think back to when I first spoke to my boys about this, and they were, young adults, and they did not want to discuss it. They just sort of shut down. So, we will talk in the next several moments about different ways you can approach it. And basically you're trying to find out, as they pointed out in this video, what is unique about the person or yourself that is, that you want known. So how to get the advanced care plan conversation started. And, there's many ways, many suggestions, and you need to sort of pick what is best for you based on, the person that you're having the conversation with. So it might start off, I need your help with something. Or an event in the newspaper, or a neighbor or a relative. I was thinking about what happened to so-and-so, and it made me realize. Or this one you could use for sure. I was at a workshop today, and it got me thinking about all of the things that I want to talk about. So, the most important thing is to be straightforward, to perhaps, get over your nervousness of talking about it, your uncomfortableness about talking about it, or who you're speaking to, and just, dive right in. So you can, like I say, expect some resistance probably, because it is an uncomfortable topic. We don't like to think about those things. But it's so important. And as was mentioned in that video, once you do have that conversation, as a caregiver or a substitute decision maker, you will feel so much more comfortable with having to make those decisions when you do need to. So, I think before we just talk about those, if you happen to have a piece of paper and a pen, we want you to jot some things down, or just think about them in your head. So number one, I look forward to this every day, every month, and every year. So what is something that you look forward to every day? And it can be as simple as, I love my morning cup of coffee. And every month, is there a special event that happens each month that you would really like? And every year. And those are the kinds of things that, if you can have the conversations about those, that gives your substitute decision maker an idea of what is important to you. Number two, when I think about my future or future health, I worry about. So what might be some things that you would worry about? Anyone willing to share something that they might be worried about?
I would say
I'll
pain.
And
I have one that's a little bit more specific.
Yes.
A feeding tube placement, actually, with the fear of declining cognitive function. I wouldn't want to be on a feeding tube and or a ventilator perpetually. So that's something I have spoken to my children and my family about very specifically.
Yeah, and that is excellent. That the more detailed and the more straightforward we can be, the more comfortable our substitute decision makers will be.
That's the goal, right? I like to think of it as a gift to my family.
Yes, yes.
They will be prepared and comfortable to make decisions and not have to survive and live with the guilt of not knowing.
Right. Yes. And then here's another just thing to think about. So the three most important things for me to have when I'm dying are, and what would those three most important things be?
And I think it's important to know that those things may change over time. And that's why we want to have these conversations ongoing.
Yes, and I think, thank you so much for sharing, because when we share, sometimes it helps us think about something that we hadn't thought of before. So, what to talk about. So your goals, and as Megan said, goals can definitely change over time, and everyone has different goals beyond living longer. And then your biggest fears and worries, we touched on that a little bit. And sometimes your fears or worries, they can't necessarily be fixed, but just talking about them is therapeutic, and it allows the person, or the person that you're a substitute decision maker for, allows them to feel understood and supported and not alone. What gives you strength? And I think that's really a very important thing. If you are in a situation where you are in a hospital or a hospice, what is it that will give you strength? People bring their own personality, their own family background, their own thoughts to this. And, having family around may give you strength. If you believe in God, then that can give you strength. But also, that is something that you would want your substitute decision maker to know. So again, you can see the theme that the more conversation that we can have around these things, the better our family or loved one will feel. And your abilities that you could not live without.
I just want to comment there on trade-offs. That can often be a very interesting conversation, because when we're talking about wishes and values and beliefs, we're not usually talking about hard choices of ventilator, no ventilator. We're talking about what it is you look forward to, what you fear if time runs out, what would be most important if time was short, and arriving at what you want your end of life to look like. It's not an epiphany, it's usually a process, and this process comes through a series of conversations, which come with the ups and downs of health, right? So I just want to add that on.
Thank you. Yeah, and another example, you may decide that you want to live with some discomfort if the medication to take away all the pain is making you so groggy that you can't communicate with your loved ones. So these are all choices that you want to think about ahead of time. Consider your must-haves. So I'm willing to undergo almost anything as long as I can still watch football on television and eat chocolate ice cream, which is a fun way of looking at it. So just again, bear with me if you have a pen and piece of paper, just jot down some must-haves that you think you would want to have. Anyone willing to share?
I don't know if this quite counts, but one of my must-haves is being able to be near the water.
For sure.
Yes.
My must-have would be meaningful conversation.
Thank you. And sometimes we're sort of left reading between the lines. Like sometimes it may not be as specific as I want to watch football and eat chocolate ice cream. So, you want to try and make sure your loved one is as comfortable with the choices you're making for them as possible. So if there's any really strong desires, then again, it's extremely important that your family know that ahead of time.
And the reason why this kind of quote is so important is because this was actually said by a client of Tulga one day. He's a doctor in the States, and his client said this to the son, who was going to be his substitute decision maker if he wasn't able to make his own decisions. And at first glance, you think, well, football and eat ice cream. Well, what does that really have to do with treatment plans? But what it means is if this gentleman wasn't able to make his own decisions, the son could say, will dad still be able to watch football? And will he still be eating chocolate ice cream? Because those are his must-haves. And if the answer is yes, it helps the son make a decision. If the answer is no, it also helps make a decision. So it's knowing what's important to that man, watching football and eating ice cream, right?
Yes, thank you. And sometimes the decisions that you're faced with are extremely difficult ones. And, you know, the medical professionals may give you their opinion, but if you know your family's wishes, then you stand a better chance. I'll give a personal example. When my mom, who had Alzheimer's, was nearing the end of her life, and she had some bleeding, and the doctor said, you know, we should go in and investigate. Had I had these conversations with her beforehand, I would have known that she would not have wanted that. But I didn't, and so that's what we did. So, you know, and as someone had mentioned earlier, well, you want to feel comfortable about the decisions you're making. So as difficult as these conversations are, you will feel so much better having had them. So quality of life, and again, quality of life is hard to define, but we sure know when we don't have it. And that sort of, you know, leans back to the other slides of, if there were certain things that you could not do, would you consider that quality of life? And
It's
can
just turning
you,
sorry, it's just, I'm just saying, it's turning the question on its head, asking what is not what's important to you, but what is important to not have in your life? Like, what makes life more difficult?
yes, and so, you know, if you can think of those concrete examples of what quality of life would not be, then you can have those decisions with your substitute decision maker. And back to the Snoopy slide again. Someday we will all die, Snoopy, true, but on all the other days we will not. So as Megan had mentioned before, people have different priorities besides living longer, and also those priorities change over time. A sort of fun example is my aunt who had high cholesterol. She was eating cheese and made the comment that, well, I really don't care if, you know, I live an extra 6 months at the end of my life, you know, I'm going to enjoy this cheese. And then several years went by and we were at a family gathering, and I said, Aunt Jane, you're eating cheese, or you're not eating cheese. And well, meanwhile, she had met a gentleman and was happily married, and she says, yeah, I want that 6 months at the end of my life. So priorities do vary and change over time. And of course, the most reliable way to learn the priorities is to ask. So we know that there are huge benefits to the advanced care planning conversations. And some of those benefits are, well, as we had talked about, it improves patient and family satisfaction with the care. People feel more comfortable speaking up on your behalf, and decreased caregiver distress and trauma because of that, because they know they're doing it for, they're following your wishes. And then there can also be unwanted investigations, interventions, and treatments, like the example I gave with my mom's surgery. And the patient is more likely to die in a preferred setting with earlier palliative care involvement as well. Also, the person is less likely to be hospitalized and admitted to critical care. Fortunately, my sister had been very clear about her wishes, and well, that's how I became familiar with Matthew House Hospice, is that my sister had asked to go to the hospice. And of course, with that, there is, if you're a system thinker, there is a decreased cost for someone to be cared for in a hospice over a hospital. So if we were doing this in person, there would be some interactive activities. I'm not sure of our time. I had sort of chosen a few questions. Do we have time for a few questions or?
So we have some questions and we also have a case study. So we'll see how our time goes. So yeah, go ahead with your questions, Nancy.
Okay, so again, this is something that you could jot down to keep in mind if you're having those conversations with someone. So who haven't you talked with in more than 6 months that you would want to talk with before you died? And sometimes, as busy as life gets, we have very, very close family or friends that we just haven't been able to talk with. And so that's sort of a question to think about.
I'll just jump in there and let you know that these questions that Nancy's pulling, the 3 she asked before and this one and a few others, come from Hello, the Conversation Game, which is a great tool for getting these conversations going.
Okay. What music do you want to listen to on your last day alive? Anyone think of a great song? I'll start. I love the Circle of Life by Elton John.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone think of any others?
I'd say country music, but then no one would be with me. Probably take the company over the tunes.
For sure.
If you had one, sorry.
No, go
If
ahead.
you had one day to say you were sorry to anyone you wanted before you died, who would be first? This one I really like. Your will is a list of things you will give away after you die. What gift would you be better off giving today rather than after your death? And we'll just finish off these questions with this one, and I hope someone will share. What is the last meal you want to eat, and who would you like to join you?
Mm. Anyone have some favorite meals they would want to have?
Yeah, I do. Surf and turf.
I have heard that before. That's a favorite for sure.
Yeah, that's good.
Noodles of butter.
Awesome. So you can see how that game, that hello game, can really get you thinking about a lot of things. Lots of those little discussions that are so important.
It's not expensive for an organization to buy or even an individual. You can go online and find it. The same with the Go Wish cards. It's a deck of cards, and the goal of these cards, there's I think 52 cards, and you have to sort them into 3 piles: priority A, B, and C. And then after that, you can only look at your priority A cards, and you got to whittle it down to 10, and then you have to put them in order. And then so the discussion goes, why are you choosing this order? And so it allows you to have a conversation with your loved one about why you've placed these Go Wish cards in this order, and it allows you to talk about your importance and what you value. So it's another great resource to use. And again, it's easy to purchase online. Okay.
You can get all these on Amazon.
I don't know about on Amazon. I ordered them directly from the company. So if you Google Go Wish, the Go Wish game, or Hello, the Conversation Game, it'll take you to the little small companies that sell them.
Okay.
I'll source them out when we send out the resources.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
Great, thank you.
I think we have one scenario for discussion. So, and scenarios are a valuable learning tool. So when we go through this situation, ask yourself these questions. What values, wishes are being illustrated? What did the scenario raise for you about the role of the substitute decision maker? and what could have been done differently to result in a more positive outcome.
So I'll leave that up. And do you want me to read this scenario, Nancy?
Sure.
Yep.
But before you read it, I'll just say that I discussed this scenario with my husband, and I have to say I was totally amazed by his response. And I'll tell you after Megan reads the scenario.
So I'll leave those questions up there. So here's the scenario. You get a call that your partner has been in a car accident and is in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. Although you and your partner have had general conversations about quality of life, mostly your conversations have focused on the traveling you plan to do when you retire in a few more years. You never had children and your partner has no siblings. In short order, you must weigh the pros and cons for numerous decisions, including to decide whether your loved one should undergo spinal surgery to stabilize fractures. However, this has high-risk complications, including paralysis. You need to tell the trauma team what you think would be important to your loved one in terms of best possible outcomes for other injuries and concerns. You both have been fortunate in life and haven't had much experience dealing with health matters over the years. You are not in the medical field and you're scared beyond comprehension for your partner's life, and you're now having to make big decisions. So there you go. That's the scenario. You've got to make some decisions for your partner. So what wishes or values are being illustrated or need to be considered?
Are you asking us this, or are we writing stuff down? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's just for a conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, what wishes or values are being illustrated in this scenario, or what would you need to consider to make decisions for your partner?
I for one would think age,
Yeah.
but you did say at the beginning they were planning on traveling, so I would think they were, still reasonably young.
Yeah. So they were when they talk about the future and about quality of life, they've talked about traveling when they retire in a few years. So let's say they're 60-ish.
Mhm.
They don't have children. They don't, and he or she, the partner, doesn't have siblings. So what's being illustrated here, and what would you as the partner have to consider?
So I'll sort of jump in and say that, well, obviously the wishes are of the person that you're being the substitute decision maker for. So that's so important. And to go back to what totally shocked me about my husband's response, because he is an extremely active, energetic person. And we said, well, if you were a quadriplegic, and I thought he would not want to live that way. And his response was, well, there's still so much to live for, so I would. So yeah. This totally illustrates why it's so important to have these conversations.
Yeah. So one of the other things is where you'd be wanting to, as the person having to make decisions quickly, is balancing this current healthcare needs with the possible future impact. And you wouldn't know if all you know about your partner is that, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, we're going to get to travel in a few years. You wouldn't know that, you know what, I'm totally cool with traveling even if I'm in a wheelchair and figuring this out because there's so much to see. So really trying to balance those two. Mm-hmm. So the next question, what did the scenario raise for you about the role of a substitute decision maker? So what does it make you think of as your role as a substitute decision maker?
You want to be able to make a realistic decision.
Yes.
Rather than emotional. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, if anyone else wants to share, you can also type into the chat bar if you don't have a microphone or if you'd prefer not to speak out loud.
Thanks, Amy.
But it does also sound like you're kind of getting, I mean, that scenario definitely like you're thrown into the decision, the hot chair very quickly.
That's exactly, yeah. And that happens. And that's why you want to have these conversations about wishes, values, and beliefs, because you never know what's going to happen when you walk out that door, no matter our age or stage in life. no matter how our health is now, it could change in an instant. And we've all learned that with COVID, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So what this illustrates, or what this raises, is how important it is to have these conversations in advance. And the other part is about informed consent, right? That we're looking at making sure that, so we stabilize, they've done whatever emergency they needed to do in the emergency, but now the emergency's over, they're looking to the substitute decision maker to make decisions. And thinking about this, what could have been done differently to result in a more positive outcome? So again, we're just going to be, we're talking about conversations that what makes life worth living? What can't you live without? So really having those conversations. Spirituality and religion can also come into play. It may be an assumed part of someone's life, or assumed part of not someone's life, but honestly, it's amazing how many times our spirituality, our connectedness to the common humanity comes up when someone is faced with life-threatening situations, even if it hadn't come up in the past. It's surprising it can come up. And so opening up that conversation, if that, and just seeing if they want to go down that route. That's another thing that can come up. Any thoughts or questions about that scenario, or does it bring up other questions or scenarios that you've come across? It's hard not having you all looking at me and seeing each other. So
it does. For me, I have, it reminds me of when my grandfather had his stroke, because it was very much instantaneous, like, okay, now decisions will be like, things needed to happen relatively quickly, and there were consequences of lots of those decisions.
Mhm.
And from my point of view, I think it also would have been helpful if I was sort of like the third layer, because I was the grandchild, of being able to be kept in the loop about what my grandfather's wishes were.
You touch on a wonderful point there, Amy,
Yes.
and that's that the more people who are involved in these conversations, the more strength a substitute decision maker has to be able to make the decision, because they know that everyone around the incapable person has had these conversations and will support you as the substitute decision maker to be their voice, which, as Nancy said, comes back to reduced trauma and guilt for a substitute decision maker or the bereaved in the future. Yeah. So, okay.
I've got one point too to make is my kids are after me to make my own funeral arrangements.
Sorry about this. Hold on. Yeah, go ahead.
Right?
Yeah.
No, I'm saying my kids are after me now to make my own funeral arrangement plans.
Yeah.
Rather than just telling them what I think I want. And I guess both of my daughters-in-law have lost one lost both parents young, and the other one lost one parent. And I think it's from their past experiences that that they feel that way.
Mhm.
That's one less responsibility for them.
So again,
Yes.
it's a great thing to do. It's not, when we talk about advanced care planning from the Speak Up or HPCO point of view, they don't consider that part of it. But as a social worker working in end of life care and hospice, and as others experience, having these conversations about a variety of different things is a wonderful thing, and it's a gift we give our families. So even if you could pre-plan, you could prepay, you could just write down what your wishes are and where you want things done. Whatever you do in that direction is a gift for your family and helps them down the road for sure. I'm sorry, I'm having struggles with my slides. It just, sometimes I'm not sure what I'm doing, but it just keeps suddenly moving on me. So here we go. Things to remember. Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, so an ideal advanced care plan conversation should result in your substitute decision maker being aware of your values and what you view as meaningful in life. And again, a reminder that it's not just one conversation, that it will carry on over a period of time. So your substitute decision maker begins to understand how you make decisions, and that will give them the comfort when they're making decisions on your behalf, and that they have information that would guide decision making for you. So remember, it is more helpful if you avoid those huge statements such as no machines, no heroics, or no feeding tubes. So instead, you want to share examples of what would make the situations bearable or unbearable for you. So they give an example rather than saying do everything. Describe what it means to not do everything, and describe the worries and fears that come to your mind. And again, that will, the more information you can give your substitute decision maker, the more comfortable they will feel acting on your behalf. And Megan has referred to this, as others have too. Advanced care planning conversations are a gift. And if you may have a bit of a time persuading the people that you want to have the conversation with that it is a gift, but they will begin to see that it absolutely is. As long as you are able to understand and communicate, you will make your own healthcare decisions. So obviously a substitute decision maker only comes into play when you cannot understand or communicate your healthcare decisions. And as we've said, advanced care planning is not just a one-time event. Conversations do get easier the more you have them. So what to do next? Step one, confirm your substitute decision maker by determining your substitute decision maker on the hierarchy, and or prepare a power of attorney for personal care. And Megan had mentioned before, if you're not comfortable with the hierarchy, then you would want to prepare a power of attorney for personal care. Complete the SDM card. That's on the little booklet that I think
I'm going to email it out. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So keep that and have it in your wallet in case of emergencies. And then a very, very important step, start those conversations with your substitute decision maker and others about what is important to you.
Oops.
And yeah, Megan was just showing some
again
resources that you will be able to click on, and they're very worthwhile information resources and go into a lot of detail as well. Oh, and there's the link for getting the Go Wish cards or the Hello game. So.
Perfect. And this is just the two participants from HBCO who put together this website. So it's just, this is an acknowledgement page, Tara and Shelley. And I'm going to stop sharing. Hold on one sec. There we go. Okay. Any other questions, thoughts that you would like, knowing that I am going to send out the slides, and I'll send out some links to Amy that she will forward on to you.
Just one quick one again. Is it always best to have just one person named?
So in the power of attorney for a personal care document, you can name more than one person. You can name as many as you want. It's good to have a backup, so you can name more than one person. The key in a power of attorney document, you can name, it's called jointly and severally, which means and or. So you can name, let's say you can name your sister Jane and your brother John to be your power of attorneys. You have to decide the and or question. Are you going to name Jane and John, or Jane or John? And that's a big decision, because saying and means both of them have to make decisions together, or means whichever one's available. So by doing that, you're putting them both on the same line. I want Jane or John. Or you can say, you know what, I'm going to name Jane and I'm going to put a substitute as John. So if Jane's not available, then John, like you're determining the hierarchy of those two people. So there is that detail that you do need to think about.
Hi guys, it's Cindy again. I just want to use a quick opportunity for a shameless plug. There's some education coming from SCHC this year. It's by registration only. I'm not even sure how much the tickets are, but our topic is talking about death won't kill you.
Oh, great. Yeah. Are you doing with Dr. Kathy Cortez Miller?
No, I don't even know Dr. Miller. Who's that?
Okay, she has a book, I think, by that title.
Oh,
yeah.
No, I never heard of her actually. Yeah. I have a small passion for advanced care planning and talking about difficult conversations. And I think that the turnover of healthcare staff has been significant. There's a lot of new grads out there in the community, and I really want to help support them to have those difficult conversations, to prompt people with things to think about. So, you know, we're ahead of the game instead of waiting till it's urgent last minute. So that's our goal, and it's coming up soon. It's on the website if anybody's interested. We've got some great speakers arranged and we're still working on it. So
conversations can be, so thank you.
Yeah. And so thank you guys for opening up this conversation and asking some really great questions and sharing some great knowledge. Again, as you mentioned, it's a conversation worth repeating and getting more information on. So you can learn more through either the palliative team at SCHC. They do offer counseling and support, and you can reach out to their specific event, which is linked in the chat now and will also be linked in the follow-up email, as well as just reaching out to SCHC for specific counseling if you live in the Scarborough area.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. And I will get that information off to you very soon, Amy.
All right. And thank you, Megan, so much. And thank you, Nancy, and everyone who's in attendance for sharing part of your day with us.
Thank you.